Hi guys, it's me Chazza HD and welcome to tonight's qualifying preview for the 2023 Italian Grand Prix at Monza. Qualifying, of course, is a part of the weekend here at Monza normally that is very, very exciting. A lot of the time because of how close the gaps are between the cars, but we've had so many great classic fights for pole position between Leclerc and Verstappen, Hamilton Verstappen, Hamilton Leclerc, Vettel Hamilton in the past, and many more in the past as well. And it is such a great a track, I think, for qualifying, and we've had many memorable laps and memorable moments as well in qualifying as well. So yeah, really looking forward to tomorrow's qualifying session tomorrow afternoon at Monza, and it should be, looking at the practice results so far, certainly practice 2, should be a great fight for pole position, thankfully, between two separate teams. One of them being this team on screen, the Scuderia Ferrari team, of course, who will be powered by the Tifosi trackside. But, of course, in this qualifying preview, we'll be going through the usual, looking at practice 2, how all the teams look so far, getting into the sector time data just to see where certain teams are quick in certain parts of the track. Also, I'll get into my final predictions going into qualifying, really based off of the data we've seen so far. And I will as well just let you guys know what updates have been brought by certain teams this weekend. And even, go through some of the circuit-specific ones. Of course, here at Monza, you want to be running as low downforce wings as possible, and teams will be bringing very specific type of rear wings, front wings, to this Grand Prix, because it's all about straight line speed here at Monza. But hope you guys are doing well, no matter what time zone you're in, what part of the world you're from. Hope you're all having as best time as possible. And yeah, let's just get straight into it. And we'll start with the results from practice 2. So Carlos Sainz ended up quickest for Ferrari. Surprising, Carlos Sainz ending up quickest by a couple hundredths of a second from his ex-teammate at McLaren, Lando Norris. McLaren really were the surprise of Friday, I would say. Because, yesterday I was saying how I thought they'd be probably, at best, you could say the 4th best team, but most likely the 5th best team over a single lap. But at the minute, I wouldn't say they're going to be fighting for pole position necessarily, but they are definitely, from what I've seen so far, one of the top 3 teams this weekend at Monza, which for them is a really good surprise. Sergio Perez 3rd, good session, except crashing at the very end of the session, where he just ran too wide at Parabolica, which now has a new name, the Curva Alboreto, of course named after Ferrari driver Michele Alboreto. Just ran too wide, went into the gravel and had a not a big crash, but couldn't really get out of the gravel trap and ended up out of the session in the end. But he had a good session, ended up a tenth of a second quicker than Max Verstappen, so hopefully that crash doesn't play on his mind too much, because the pace looks good from Checo so far. Oscar Piastri in 4th, just confirming McLaren do look very quick. Max Verstappen 5th. Max didn't have really the greatest lap. He did complain, I think, on his lap of traffic through the middle sector. So I think Max definitely could have gone a bit quicker. But overall, Red Bull don't look, with their single lap pace, that great compared to what we used to. They're still quick, don't get me wrong, but compared to Ferrari, looks like it's going to be a real fight for Red Bull to, secure pole position, like it was, of course, last year. And Ferrari, of course, last year ended up the victors in that fight for pole. Red Bull, of course, won the grand prize on Sunday. Charles Leclerc 6th, surprising that he's 3.5 tenths down on Carlos Sainz. Not quite sure why. But I do expect Leclerc to be quicker than Sainz tomorrow, because usually around Monza and usually around any track, he is. And then after that, you've got Alex Albon in 7th place. Now, Albon and Williams not as quick as I expected, so I will, of course, have to revise my predictions from what I was going on about yesterday, where I thought they could qualify tomorrow in 3rd. I don't think that's quite possible, but if this is true, then it does indicate what I'm about to say. If it is true, then it does indicate that that there is more pace there from the Williams, and they probably could get close-ish with, say, McLaren. At the end, or towards the end of FP2, on the graphic on the F1 broadcast, they were showing Albon as having done that 121.9 on the medium compound tyre when everyone else had done their time on the soft. Around this track, the medium should be about 0.4 of a second slower than the soft tyre. The 3 tyres, by the way, this weekend are the 3 softest compounds that Pirelli have, the C5, C4 and C3. Good to see, finally, they're bringing the softest compounds to a track where, tyre wear doesn't really matter. So yeah, Albon, I don't think will be fighting for pole, obviously, but might get a bit close to the second McLaren, whoever that is. Probably going to be Piastri, judging by what's happened so far. So Albon can get a lot closer to, Ferrari, McLaren and Red Bull Williams. I think definitely there is more pace there. And from what I've seen so far, I'm confident that Williams have got, say, at worst, probably the 4th quickest car this weekend, which is still really good. That's still, puts them really as a front runner. And then you've got Fernando Alonso in 8th. Alonso did well. Aston Martin, of course, this track not going to suit their car. It's the worst type of track for their car, and they're just desperately waiting until they can get this Grand Prix event over and done with, because the next Grand Prix at Singapore, they should be really strong. George Russell 9th for Mercedes. Mercedes are not as bad looking as what, we've seen so far. Lewis Hamilton, of course, as I'll show you in a moment, is down in, I think, 17th place after practice 2. Hamilton only did, though, his best time on the medium. Mercedes will be quicker tomorrow, no doubt about it, but I don't think they are really anywhere near Ferrari, Red Bull, McLaren, and probably are slower than Williams. The main team they're going to be fighting will be Aston Martin, I think, in qualifying. Maybe Williams, if Williams don't, they don't turn out to be as quick as I expect, but yeah, Mercedes overall, not as good as I expected coming into the weekend, and yeah, not looking good. It's not, it's not terrible what we've seen so far, but given it is the Mercedes works team, yeah, definitely not good. They were struggling a bit today, I believe, with the wing setup, which of course they'll have to get right for tomorrow, because if they don't get it right, they'll be in big trouble. And then Nico Hülkenberg completing the top 10 for Haas. Haas looked like, as I expected coming into this weekend, the 7th best team, and clearly better than Alpine, Alfa Romeo and Alfa Tauri. And then the rest of the field, you got Magnussen 11th. Good to see Magnussen in a decent position. Bottas at 12th. Yeah, really, as you'll see there in a moment, the only reason he was up in P12 was because he had a really good first sector. Alpine, look, yeah, one of the slowest teams in. Not surprised. They don't have the straight line speed to compete here. AlphaTauri of Yuki Tsunoda 14th. Again, no surprise. AlphaTauri not going to be quick here. And then Ocon 15th. Logan Sargent 16th, which, I'm sorry, is poor. He ended up 7 or 8 tenths of a second, I think, slower than Albon. Around this track, which, 3/4 of it is flat out full throttle. That is not acceptable from Logan. And he should be, really, 10th or 11th, I would say. If he was to put in a lap that would be, in my view, good enough, at the very least, then yeah, 10th or 11th, I think, really is where he should be. Definitely not the 16th place. It's weird, though, because in practice 1, I think Sargent was only 0.2 of a second off, so I don't know what happened in practice 2 for him to be miles off the pace. Lewis Hamilton 17th, yeah, did his time on the medium compound tyre, was complaining that he just wasn't really getting to grips with the whole setup of the car. I'm sure they'll fix that and get the car in a decent condition for tomorrow. But yeah, Mercedes don't look good. That is for sure. Liam Lawson, half a second off his teammate, pretty much. I mean, it's practice, and given that he's still had not a lot of time in the car, it's to be expected, really, isn't it? So, yeah. And then Zhou in 19th. No idea why he was 7.5 tenths slower than his teammate Bottas. That is very poor from Zhou today. But we saw, didn't we, at Zandvoort, that he was massively slower than Valtteri in practice, and then in qualifying ended up out-qualifying Valtteri. But then Lance Stroll 20th, he did not set a lap time because he broke down on the track because of a fuel system issue or fuel pressure issue. I'm not exactly sure what it was. I think it might have been fuel system issue for Lance Stroll. So yeah, Aston Martin, not a great day for them. But let's now get into the sector time data. So the first sector, it's all about power. Ferrari looking very strong in the first sector, a tenth of a second quicker than the next best car being the Williams of Alex Albon, looking good for Williams. McLaren, I've got to say, with their, and we will get onto it soon, they've brought a few new parts to help boost their low downforce setup with some, better low downforce wings. That really is helping them, because I didn't think they would be say as quick in a sector like this compared to the other Mercedes powered teams of Aston Martin and of course the Mercedes Works team as they were. So yeah, McLaren, they look definitely good with their setup. Red Bull, they should definitely show a bit more tomorrow. I'd be very surprised if tomorrow they ended up a quarter of a second slower in the first sector. Yeah, you should expect that to come down. Fernando Alonso in 5th. I mean, that's pretty much where you would hope at best Aston Martin could be, so no complaints about that. Bottas and the Alfa Romeo looking good. AlphaTauri looking pretty good through Sector 1. Alpine, just, yeah, pretty poor. Haas, I have to say, very surprising their first sector time, given they still ended up in the top 10. So, despite ending up in the top 10, there is definitely more pace there from Haas. How much more pace? You'd imagine probably a tenth and a half, maybe 0.2 of a second at most in the first sector. So Haas could be, definitely with Hülkenberg, who's been a real star in qualifying this year, they could be a team to look out for. And the Mercedes were slowest. Again, they were struggling, I think, a bit with the wing setup, but also they do tend to be one of the teams that sandbag the most in practice. So I don't think we can read, massively into that first sector time from them. They'll definitely be stronger tomorrow, probably around where Aston Martin's pace is in the first sector. The middle sector, McLaren and Ferrari, just as quick as each other. I've got to say, Ferrari's pace in the middle sector, really impressive. Half a tenth quicker than Red Bull. And if they are going to get qualifying, because you'd think Red Bull would be the stronger team in the middle sector and Ferrari would most likely be the better team in the first and final sector, if Ferrari can equal, if not be quicker than Red Bull in the middle sector, then their chances of pole position are really good. So that's the key for Ferrari. And so far, looking good. Again, half a tenth quicker. I am surprised, though, that Aston Martin are so slow compared to McLaren. I thought they would have been maybe tenth of a second at least closer. So there is probably a bit more pace there to be found. You'd have to say the same for Mercedes as well. Definitely more pace there to be shown. Williams, their pace through the middle sector is fine, I'd say. Haas's pace as well, absolutely fine. I'm surprised at how poor Alpine are in the middle sector, where you would expect them to be at their strongest. They are very weak through there, nearly half a second slower than McLaren. And then the two slowest teams, no surprise, AlphaTauri and Alfa Romeo. The only surprise really is, Alfa Romeo and AlphaTauri being not the two slowest teams in the first sector. And we'll see, of course, how that plays out tomorrow and whether they can keep that up through the first sector of the lap. But McLaren and Ferrari and Red Bull in the middle sector, they are clearly, or they have clearly separated themselves from the rest of the field, as you can clearly see with those times. And then the final sector, which of course you've got the Ascari chicane, and then a straight leading into the Parabolica, and then another straight, obviously, to the start-finish line. McLaren, very impressive in the final sector, just about quicker than Red Bull. Ferrari, bit surprising them being a tenth of a second down, even on Red Bull in that final sector. So, I mean, pace looks good from Ferrari in practice, but if there is a sector they need to improve in, it is the final sector where they could, probably find another tenth of a second. And if they were to find that and keep up the level of pace they've got compared to Red Bull in Sector 1 and Sector 2, they should be really strong tomorrow. They really, really should, with both cars as well. Mercedes, I have no idea why they're that slow in the final sector compared to McLaren. Pretty much 0.3 of a second lower. Williams, I would have expected quite a bit more pace from them in the final sector. Again, though, Albon, we think, did his best final sector time on the medium, so maybe that is a factor as to why he didn't go maybe as quick as he could have done. And then you got Haas looking, again, not great, definitely could do better. Aston Martin, quite poor in the final sector, I have to say, and pretty much 0.2 of a second down on Mercedes. I think Aston Martin need to really be a tenth of a second quicker through there. Alpine, once again, 8th best team, and that's solidly where they are. And then the two slowest teams, you've got, Alfa Romeo and Alpha Tauri. But overall, for the lap, if we go back to the middle sector times, which I think is, say, the most representative sector times of the of the entire laps that we've seen so far, the pecking order going into qualifying, in my view, is Ferrari quickest. I think genuinely they have the quickest car, not in race conditions, purely I'm talking in qualifying conditions, of course. Red Bull, I think, will be second quickest, McLaren third, and then Williams fourth, and fifth is hard to say. I personally think it'll be Mercedes, because I think they'll show a bit more pace tomorrow than they showed today. So, Mercedes 5th, Aston Martin 6th, Haas 7th, Alpine 8th, Alfa Romeo probably 9th, and then AlphaTauri in 10th. That's what I think the pecking order is going into qualifying tomorrow. The only areas where I could be wrong is maybe McLaren could snatch a front row if they really, manage Q3 well with, getting a really good slipstream and delivering a really good lap at a very important time. Also, looking, at the Mercedes-Aston Martin fight, I think definitely I could be wrong on that and possibly wrong on, where Williams are. But I think, that's how I think the pecking order looks going into qualifying tomorrow. So let's get into my final qualifying prediction based off of what I've seen so far. And I think Ferrari will, for the second year running and for the fourth time since 2018, will be on pole position for the for the Italian Grand Prix, but they will be on pole, I think, for this 2023 edition. And Charles Leclerc will take his third pole position at Monza. Of course, the Italians adore the Monegasque. Max Verstappen will line up in second. It will be a very close fight between Leclerc, Verstappen, and Carlos Sainz as well, who's looking quick, and I think he'll be just behind Verstappen in third. Given how quick Ferrari look at the minute, I could see a Ferrari front row. I actually could see it because, again, they do look really quick so far. Sergio Perez in 4th. I think there will be a drop-off in pace from him, and he will be just ahead of the McLaren of Lando Norris. In P5, Oscar Piastri will be in P6, just ahead of the Williams of Alex Albon. Yeah, McLaren, 3rd row lockout. I think they'd be pretty satisfied with that, given that this is going to be probably their weakest track on the calendar. So yeah, I don't think they're going to be, really that bothered if it's only 5th and 6th on the grid. Alex Albon in P7, if Williams were to get that, I think they'd be pretty happy with that, even though maybe there's a potential for a 3rd row. I still think 7th place, they'd be happy with that because, the chances then of them scoring points is pretty good. Lewis Hamilton, I think, will be in 8th, with George Russell in 9th, the two Mercedes, and then Fernando Alonso will just about round out the top 10. Again, Hamilton, Russell, Alonso, very close fight it will be between those 3 drivers. But that's my top 10, guys. Let me know in the chat, based off what we've seen so far this weekend and all the data I just went through. Do you think Ferrari can take pole position? And actually, that is the topic of my poll that is currently running at the top of the live chat. Will Ferrari take pole position for the 2023 Italian Grand Prix? That is the question I've asked. Yes or no? Let me know in that poll. In my view, it will be yes. I think they will take pole position. I'm not saying they'll win. I don't think they will win the race on Sunday. I think Max will be just way too strong to stop. But in terms of pole position, I think they'll get it. I think they will get it. I think the pace absolutely is there. So let me know, in the chat, in the poll, all of that stuff. And of course, I'll get to your comments and all, later on in this stream. And I'll just go back to this quickly, as I'll just quickly load up the the tweet from Albert Fabrega going through the list of upgrades for this weekend's race. So let me just get that up. And not expecting there to be that much. The only thing I've heard really is that McLaren have brought 6 new parts, but I think it's really all to do with, helping with the low downforce setup rather than it being proper, permanent, aerodynamic upgrades. Right, so I've got it up. So yeah, let's or actually, hold on a second. Let me just what do you call it? Let me just adjust something quickly, and then I'll get it up. Right, so here you go. Here are the team upgrades. Red Bull, both of theirs front and rear wing, circuit specific. Let's go on to Ferrari. They've got one performance upgrade, which is a new rear wing, and it is for drag reduction. Of course, that is incredibly important here at Monza. And it says lower downforce top and lower rear wing design. So a new rear wing, lower downforce rear wing to help them at tracks where they're going to need it, such as, here. Later on in the season, we'll have obviously Las Vegas. They probably might use it there, given how long the straight is at that circuit. Obviously, Sao Paulo right at the end of the year as well. So yeah, that's a new performance upgrade there for Ferrari. Mercedes have got a couple new performance upgrades. Again, drag reduction for the rear wing, small chord upper rear wing, and small chord beam wing. But again, they haven't quite got the balance right yet from what I saw in practice. So, going to take a bit of time. Alpine, new beam wing, but that is circuit specific. Here's McLaren. As you can see, 6 new upgrades. 5 of them are circuit specific and are to help with their pace here at this specific track. The only performance upgrade is a new front corner, new front brake duct scoop, and that's for flow conditioning. So, yeah. But again, everything else, front wing, rear end plate, and rear corner, it's all just to help with what you need to be quick here at Monza. Alfa Romeo, a new front corner. That's a performance upgrade, local load, new geometry of the front suspension. So, well, that's not going to help them this weekend, really. We'll see what it does for them in Singapore, where you'd think it would probably give them a bit more performance, or a slight bit more performance, rather. Not Alfa Romeo, Aston Martin, new rear wing, but again, circuit specific. AlphaTauri, a couple circuit-specific upgrades, a couple performance ones, though, and those ones are drag reduction, new rear corner, where it says, compared to the baseline rear brake duct assembly, several of the upper rear brake drum elements have been removed, and rear view mirrors, compared to the baseline rear view mirror assembly, 3 turning vanes have been removed from the outboard mirror stem. And then the final 2 teams, you've got Williams, new front wing, again, circuit specific, I think, their balance range. And then the final team, we've just gone through them, haven't we? AlphaTauri. Let me just check if there's any more. I don't think there is, so no new ones for Haas F1. So, yeah, there you go. So pretty much all the upgrades are specific for this type of track. So, yeah, as I said yesterday, upgrades, not really going to be a thing here in terms of, performance upgrades that will be on the car permanently for every single Grand Prix, like a new floor, new side pods, stuff like that, front nose cone, new type of front wing design, stuff like that. Again, it's not going to be brought to a race like this. So we'll see what happens with upgrades when we get to Singapore, where we know already there's going to be a couple upgrades there from Red Bull, and I think Ferrari possibly as well, who I think their next proper performance upgrade is going to be, probably in a couple weeks' time. I think the last time Ferrari properly brought a proper big upgrade was, when was it? I think it might have been back in, was it Spanish Grand Prix, where they brought a new, or they, redesigned their side pod and floor? Really, since then, they've only just brought minor bits. So this next upgrade from Ferrari is going to be probably a big upgrade, and quite a few new bits, as they are desperate to try and end the season well, and then, obviously, start next season a lot better. But let's go now through the teams and how I think they will get on in qualifying tomorrow. Looney Classics in the chat asking, in race pace, the long runs do show Mercedes being the second fastest car. I'll have a look at that in a moment. And also Looney Classics saying, I've been watching Chazza for a while now, and I now know his quali predictions are always way off. Mercedes are going to be faster than McLaren. You need to take context into account. Well, if the context you mean is, looking at the race pace, then I disagree. Because, you're going to, certain cars that are quick on long runs are not going to be quick on, low fuel runs. So yeah, it's not really similar, I would say. But yeah, if you could clarify what you mean by the context that I need to take into account, then that would be great. Unfortunately, because of Sergio Perez's crash causing the red flag, we didn't really get a good gauge of who is looking quick with their race pace. Mercedes, though, don't look very... let me look. Yeah, Mercedes don't look that great. They don't look terrible, but it's hard to say really where they are because, again, McLaren, Aston Martin, Williams didn't really get to do a race run, so we'll have to see. But yeah, let me know, what about the context there, just to clarify. Anyway, let's go into the teams, and let's get into how I think they'll get on. So, Red Bull Racing, yeah, Red Bull, they look good. But the pace isn't spectacular. It's not what we saw last week, of course, where they were on pole by half a second, and you could already see in practice that their pace was looking really quite strong compared to the field. And obviously we know they increased their speed on a Saturday compared to a Friday, but Ferrari also do tend to be a team that don't quite show as much of their full hand as, say, a team like McLaren or a team like Williams would on a Friday. So they have got a worthy competitor this weekend, and it's going to be a really good scrap between the Red Bull and Ferrari teams. And at the end of the day, obviously, if certain drivers, certain teams can get a big benefit from slipstream at the right time, that would be really great. But I think it's really going to come down to the fight for pole, the performance between the drivers. And if Max can produce the absolute best lap he can and get a bit of a slipstream as well, then yeah, pole position absolutely is possible. But as we have seen with, Charles Leclerc and Ferrari, obviously, with it being a home race, you're going to expect them to put on a great show as they normally do. They always tend to be quite a bit quicker here than most tracks around the calendar. And we know that Leclerc, especially in qualifying, is a super strong driver, as we have seen so many times in the last couple years. So it's going to be really close. It's going to be decided by very fine margins, maybe a slight error here or there, or maybe just not quite picking up enough of a slipstream from a car ahead. It's going to be decided by very fine margins. I don't think we're going to see, Leclerc or Max or even Sainz or Perez on pole by 3-4 tenths of a second. I'd be very surprised by that. But yeah, Red Bull, I don't think have got the quickest car for qualifying, at least. For the race, yeah, they've probably got the best car this weekend, as they always do, and as they have done, really, for the last, couple years. Really, since these type of car, regulations started at the start of 2022, Red Bull always tend to be the best team on a Sunday. So yeah, if, I've predicted them to be second and fourth. If that's where they end up, I don't think Red Bull will be bothered in the slightest, because I think they know, as long as they don't have a disaster at the start of the race, they'll win the race and probably secure a 1-3 in the race, maybe even a 1-2, if Ferrari's pace is not too special. So, yeah, I don't think Red Bull are really that bothered about qualifying, because they know that as long as they secure, like I predicted, a second and fourth, second and third, that they've got the car to deliver the all-important result on Sunday. So, yeah, Red Bull looking absolutely fine. And in terms of, the fight for pole position, not going to be as easy for them as it was last week at Zandvoort. Let's now go on to the Mercedes team. And yeah, Mercedes, they don't look that good. Mercedes definitely are, I think, in a bit of trouble, because they're definitely not as quick as the top three teams that we saw in practice. I don't think they're going to be on the pace of, Ferrari, Red Bull, McLaren. At best, they'll be on the pace, if not just about quicker than Williams, and be, say, the fourth best team, which to be fair, is what I thought is where I thought they would be in the pecking order, but I didn't think they would be slower than McLaren. I thought it'd be Williams who would be quicker than them. So yeah, just a difficult day for Mercedes. Again, struggling with the overall setup of the car. I'm sure they'll get it right. They always, tend to get the setup of the car right, 95% of the time, do Mercedes. And I'm sure Lewis Hamilton tomorrow will be the main man for Mercedes. Always been very quick here. George Russell, I have to say, last year here at Monza was his pace was pretty good compared to Hamilton's, but Lewis was quicker in qualifying, I remember, by I think a few hundredths of a second. So yeah, Hamilton should just about be the faster driver. But yeah, I think the best I can see for Mercedes, the absolute best, is 6th and 8th, something like that. I think that's realistically the best you're going to get if you're a Mercedes fan. But my prediction is 8th and 9th, which of course would not be a good result for them. And if they were to get that and the top 10 was to end up how I predicted, not sure they're really going to get many more positions in the race. They'll probably just finish around 7th, 8th place. So yeah, they really need to step up quite a lot compared to what we saw in practice today, because I don't think Mercedes can afford to have a really poor qualifying session, because as I got into with the championship standings, and I can actually show it on screen, Aston Martin, of course, are in 3rd, Mercedes up in 2nd, Ferrari are in 4th. Let's say Ferrari finished 3rd and 4th, that's 27 points. If Mercedes only grab like 8 points from this race, that's a gain from Ferrari of like 20 points. And Ferrari, 54 points behind. So they don't want to be giving the teams behind them hope that they can finish in 2nd. Because Mercedes, you've got to say, last couple races, they've not really delivered on what we expected from them. In Holland, I thought they'd be on the podium. Obviously, they didn't. They had a bit of a strategy disaster. And then in Spa, despite bringing a new floor upgrade, they just didn't deliver performance-wise the weekend really that we expected, and maybe they expected as well. So they don't want to be giving, again, those teams behind them hope that 2nd place is up for grabs, because it really shouldn't be. With the driver lineup they've got and the car that it should have, it just shouldn't be possible. They should be easily wrapping up that 2nd place. But after Zandvoort, and from what I've seen so far this weekend, definitely tightening up, for that 2nd position. So, yeah, Mercedes definitely will be stronger tomorrow, but I don't think they're going to be, I don't think they're going to be fighting in the top 5 or anything like that. I'd be quite surprised by that. They'd have to really fix those, whatever setup issues they've got. They'd have to really fix those massively, I think, to give themselves a proper chance of being able to do that. But yeah, 8th and 9th is what I predicted. Let's hope that I am a bit wrong. As of course, someone just said that I'm always wrong. Yeah, let's now go on to Aston Martin. Of course, Lance Stroll breaking down with an issue. Shame for him. I've got to say, quickly, talking about Lance Stroll, I need to read this out because it's just so obviously wrong what I've, or a little story that I've seen to do with Lance Stroll. Let me see if I can find it quickly on racefans.net. It was the team principal of Aston Martin, Mike Crack, going on about how they have failed Lance Stroll rather than, the other way round. They are responsible for why his performances have not been that great rather than, the other way round. Let me just try and find these comments if I can, because I just thought it was just laughable, really. So, oh no, won't be able to view it on there. So Mike said, oh, there you go. I can do it now. Mike said, quote, in terms of, Lance Stroll's poor results and his lack of pace, Mike said, the team principal of Aston Martin, quote, there is not a marked gap in performance. There is a marked gap in points. By the way, there is a marked gap in performance. We've literally seen it this season between Alonso and Stroll. There's been races this season where Alonso has been nearly a second, if not a second, quicker than Stroll. So that is factually incorrect. And then he goes on to say, and then it's important to separate between the two. We as a team are analysing the season from both perspectives, from both drivers. And I think we as a team need to do a much, much better job on that side of the garage on race strategy. But also we had reliability issues. I can't remember Stroll having that many reliability issues, to be fair. And it was always hitting that car. I mean, yeah, maybe a bit more, but I can't remember Stroll having that many problems, to be honest. That is something we need to do much better, he says. And then he goes on to say, and cited the Dutch Grand Prix as an example while defending Stroll, and said, quote, we have to look back and look at the strategy we adopted in Zandvoort. I think Lance had a strong weekend up until then. I don't see how you could say he had a strong weekend. Alonso was 5th in qualifying and Lance was in 11th. I just don't see how you can say that. But as a team, we have to take responsibility for a call that was just not decisive enough, which ruined his race at the end of the day. I think that was to do with, whether to go on to inters at the start or, stick with dries. And that's probably what he's talking about. And Aston Martin, by the way, they have confirmed that Lance Stroll will be driving for them next season. We have no idea what his contract is. It's basically just Aston Martin will have Lance at their team until Aston Martin or Lawrence, the ultimate boss, the final boss of Aston Martin, says otherwise. Yeah, that is just such bullshit. Most of the reason Lance Stroll has been poor in 2023 is because he has been poor, not because the team have regularly screwed his weekends up. There were a couple weekends, where Aston Martin didn't help, where, of course, Lance was running in the top 5 in Saudi Arabia, then he had an ERS failure. Miami, they had a strategy issue there where they tried to use only one set of tyres in Q1. Stroll ended up getting knocked out of Q1. Alonso almost himself got knocked out in Q1 there because of that strategy. So, yeah, there's been a couple races, definitely, where he has suffered because of that. But not, not 1 in every 2 races. We're talking 2 or 3 out of, the 13 races so far this season. So, it's just not true, is it? It's just not true whatsoever. Lance has been poor because he has, 1, not been consistent, and 2, has had a real lack of pace compared to Fernando. End of story. I know, of course, he's not going to come out and say, yeah, Lance has been shit. I know he's not going to say that because Lawrence, his father, is the owner and boss of the team. Of course I know that. But, no need to, I just think coming out and basically just saying a load of bullshit like that, which is, again, it's factually not correct, some of the stuff he was saying, I just don't think really was needed. I mean, if he had said, yeah, Lance has been a bit unlucky this season, just left it at that, then that's fine. But saying stuff like, there's not a marked gap in performance is just factually not true. But anyway, enough of that. This weekend, Aston Martin, don't look that quick. They will do well, very well, if they were to get both cars into the top 10. Most likely we'll just get Fernando into the top 10. I predicted Fernando to be in P10. I do think in quali, Aston Martin will be slower than Mercedes. In the race, though, maybe Aston Martin can, turn it around. But, yeah, most likely, I think Alonso ends up 5th row of the grid, which would be either 9th or 10th place. For me, it'll be 10th place because Hamilton and Russell, I think, will be just about too quick for Fernando. So, yeah, Fernando in P10. Lance Stroll probably will end up in 12th. Yeah, probably 12th, maybe 13th at the absolute worst. But obviously not a great start for the weekend for him. Didn't do practice one, did Lance, because Felipe Drugovich, the reserve driver, was in the car. And then he only did, 2 laps in practice 2, and then his car broke down. So a lot of work to do in practice 3 tomorrow to get properly up to speed and really get some confidence going into qualifying. Of course, Lance normally has been, competitive here at Monza, but it's going to be hard for him to do that this weekend. But as you know, I've said before, this track just doesn't suit Aston Martin, and I'd be very much surprised if they ended up getting a top 7, say, in qualifying. It'd be quite the shock. Let's now go on to the home team themselves, the Scuderia Ferrari team, and they are looking very quick. And it's not a surprise, really, that they're looking quick, at least, because this track, should suit their car. And it is the track that suits their car the most out of any track on the calendar. So, again, it's not a surprise they're quick. Only surprise is just how quick they are. They look to me to be not comfortably the quickest team, but I'd say by probably a tenth or so from what I've seen so far. I think they are the quickest team this weekend, at least when it comes to quali pace. So, yeah, looking very promising for the Ferrari team. And if Carlos Sainz can deliver as great a pace as we saw in practice 2, and Leclerc can step up his performance a lot more tomorrow, a front row lockout would be, or is, I think, not likely, but it is definitely possible with the pace they've got. So, yeah, it is going to be a massive day tomorrow for Ferrari. And let's be honest, if Ferrari are going to win their home race, of course, a mechanical issue for Max Verstappen would help on Sunday. But if they're going to beat Max Verstappen purely on pace in the race, then they're going to need to lock out the front row. Because if they've just got Leclerc or Sainz up there having to defend from Max Verstappen, then inevitably, as we know, Verstappen will find a way past, whether it's, through the pit stop phase or whether it's on track. If they've got 1-2 with the straight line speed they've got, makes it quite a bit more difficult for Max to just sail past and win the race. And of course, the second Ferrari car, whoever that is, will defend like crazy, keep Max back to try and allow the team to win their home race. So, yeah, if they're going to win, a front row, of course, is what they need. Because even if they just get pole position, I think the chances of them winning are pretty low, given how Red Bull's pace is normally, compared to the Ferrari team and really the rest of the field. So, yeah, looking very strong for Ferrari. I've got my fingers crossed for them. I really hope they can get pole position. They've not had pole. They started on pole at Spa, but they didn't, finish in first place and qualify. The last time they finished in first was qualifying back in Baku at the end of April, where Leclerc, got pole position for the actual race and the sprint race. Of course, ended up finishing third in the actual race on the Sunday. So, yeah, it's been already quite a while since that last pole position. And of course, coming into this weekend, their last win in Formula 1, 14 months ago in Austria. So there is, it is a big weekend, I would say, for Ferrari. Because if they're going to win a race this season, it really is going to have to be this Grand Prix, isn't it? Because again, this track suits their car the most. Plus, with the performance they've shown so far, if they don't win this weekend, I just don't see how they do win a Grand Prix this season. Because I don't think at the remaining races they'll have enough performance in hand to even be the second best team on the grid at a particular Grand Prix. So it's really now or never for them in 2023. And if they were to, of course, get pole and even lock out the front row, maybe even win the race this weekend and stop Max Verstappen from taking the consecutive win record for drivers in Formula One history, yeah, that would be a massive boost going into 2024 and would give them some really positive momentum, especially when in Singapore they should have a new big upgrade coming, which hopefully will give them an extra 2-3 tenths of a second and maybe allow them to push after Mercedes in second in the championship. So we'll see on that. But yeah, for Ferrari, it is looking really good. Really good. And I also, last thing I want to say is I hope that Carlos Sainz can keep up the really strong pace so far. I think Carlos was second in practice one, only slightly slower than Verstappen. And then, yeah, obviously just about quickest in practice two. So Carlos looking great, and let's hope he can keep it up, because really a lot of this season he's just been quite average, has Carlos. But let's finally go on to McLaren, and then I'll come to you guys in the chat, hear what you guys have to say. Yeah, McLaren look quite a bit stronger than I expected. Clearly, their upgrades to improve their lower downforce setup, their ultra low downforce setup, have worked, because in all of the sectors they look pretty competitive. Norris looking surprisingly quick compared to Piastri. I thought the gap between him and Piastri would be a bit closer than a tenth and a half, nearly 2 tenths of a second between the two. So Lando looking really on it so far. Piastri as well looking quick. And overall, McLaren look like they're going to have a strongish day tomorrow at Monza. And if they do end up with what I predicted for them, you know, third row lockout, fifth and sixth, then I think that would be satisfactory, given how, again, this is going to be their weakest track of the the races remaining on the calendar. And of course, in a couple of weeks in Singapore, maybe they'll be fighting for pole position. So yeah, if they can finish at least fifth and sixth with both cars, I think that'd be good. Maybe if one of, Sainz, Perez, or even Leclerc or Verstappen has a bit of a struggle, maybe they can get onto the second row of the grid. But I would be very surprised if they ended up on the front row. I'd be very surprised by that. I just don't think the pace is going to legitimately be there. They would have to get some sort of super slipstream to really, power onto that front row. It's going to take something, very special for that to happen. But the absolute best I can see for McLaren is fourth. But yeah, fifth and sixth is what I've gone for. I think they're comfortably one of the top three quickest teams here at Monza. And yeah, things are looking great for McLaren. Let's just hope they deliver this weekend. Because of course, last couple weekends, McLaren haven't quite delivered on the promising performance they've had. And of course, they do want to catch the teams ahead in the championship to try and end the season well. So they do have obviously quite a bit of work to do. And having a good weekend here would definitely be a good start in trying to catch possibly Aston Martin, Mercedes, or Ferrari. So yeah, McLaren definitely third best team. I'm pretty confident in that prediction. And it is actually funny with the top three teams this weekend, not in the same order, but the last time we had Red Bull, Ferrari, McLaren be the three top teams at Monza, I mean, you're going back to when I started watching Formula One. It's very nostalgic, that top three, or the top six cars we saw in practice too. Very nostalgic, because when I started watching in the back end of 2011, those were the three best teams. And they weren't quite in the order we saw in practice too, of course. In 2011, it was Red Bull, McLaren, then Ferrari. But yeah, it's very nostalgic, and it's been a very long time since we've seen those three be the three quickest teams. Anyway, those are the front runners before though we go on to the midfield runners and how they'll probably get on, let's not do that. Let's go back onto these pictures and let's come to you guys in the live chat and see what you guys have to say. Make sure to put in the comments, put in the live chat what you think is going to happen here in qualifying for tomorrow. And as well, of course, if you are new to the channel, don't forget to subscribe for more content like this, because we've got plenty of content coming your way tomorrow, Sunday, and Monday as well. I'll be doing a stream on Monday evening. Tomorrow, though, I will be live from 11:15 a.m. UK time for the Practice 3 F2 Sprint Race and qualifying watch-along for the Italian Grand Prix. Then on Sunday, I'll be live from 12 p.m. UK time for the race preview and race watch-along. Most likely, I'll be solo for that watch-along. We'll have to see. But yeah, I'll be live from 12 p.m., 2 hours before the race starts for, again, the preview and then the watch-along. And then on Sunday, it'll be a weekend review and really just a review of what's happened in the last couple races as we go forward into the final 8 races of the season after this weekend's race is completed. So yeah, plenty of content coming your way, so make sure to subscribe for that. And for everyone watching, make sure to smash the like button. Currently on 20 likes, let's try and get up to 25 or even 30 likes if we can by the end of the stream. Let me just read a few comments and then we'll we'll move on to the rest of the teams as we're just coming to the back end of the stream really. Blue Flag Alpha says no idea what's going through Sergio's mind. I haven't seen the on-board of Perez's crash, but off-board, the first replay I saw of it, it did look really weird. Because he was really far off the track at the Parabolica. It's almost like he just lost concentration for a second and ran too wide and then just put his foot down and then ended up in the gravel. It was a poor way to end the day, but his pace looks good. And Blue Flag Alpha saying, agree, Ferrari will get pole. Obviously, read out Looney Classics' comments saying, I've been watching Chancellor for a while now, and I know his qualifying predictions are always way off. The thing is with my predictions is I am basing it off what we have seen so far, and I also do account for certain teams, who I believe do sandbag a bit more than others. Normally the teams that sandbag more than others are the 3 works teams, Ferrari, Mercedes, and Red Bull. They're not a works team, but you know what I mean. They're one of the top teams, and normally those 3 teams don't quite show as much of their hand in Friday practice, so I account for that as well, and that's why I come up with the predictions that I've gone for. But I'd love to see you try and predict qualifying, because this season it's been really hard to predict qualifying. We've seen so many surprises, so many wild grids this season. It is hard to predict. It is really hard to predict, especially when you're trying to predict it for a Grand Prix where it's, it's like Austria, where the gap between 1st and 10th is like half a second or 7/10 at most. It's very hard to predict. So, I'm never going to be totally correct or mostly correct. And plus, I don't want my predictions to be totally correct, because how boring would that be if I was 70-80% correct, 90% of the time? It'd be boring as hell. So yeah, I don't really see how that's an issue. I think most people's predictions are definitely, when it comes to quali, are off, and even when it comes to the race, are quite off as well. Greg Martinez says, I'm Mexican and damn Checo pissed the crap out of me today. For that, I blame Red Bull. And I don't know what that word is. Bird? Or I don't even know how to pronounce that with the Y. He's Red Bull's puppet, and it was so obvious last week. Yeah, not quite sure about that. Name says Checo isn't a very flexible, adaptive driver, I think. I would disagree. I think he can be adaptable, but maybe not flexible with how, with his driving style. But I think he can absolutely adapt to different types of tracks, different track conditions. I think he's absolutely capable of that. Hello to Vince, by the way. Good to see you. Greg Martinez says Ferrari has to have tyres ready in order to win. Yeah, well, that's really why they just can't compete with Red Bull still, isn't it? It's because they still have those issues of overworking the tyres, and then also the car not being consistent with its handling when they switch onto a new set of tyres. That's why the drivers this season just haven't had the confidence with the car, because it's a very inconsistent car in terms of its handling. It's not a car that you can just get into and know how it's going to handle. You basically find out when you get driving the car. When with the Red Bull, the drivers have a lot of confidence in the car because they know it's going to be super grippy and very easy to drive in really all facets. So that's really the difference, and that's what Ferrari needs to sort out next year. The issues they've got with their car really are fundamental. When I say fundamental, what I mean is they're issues that they can't be just fixed with an upgrade. They need to be fixed with a completely new car, which of course will be the 2024 car. Dustin Salinas says predictions should be predictions, just saying we get enough BS on Sky/ESPN. True. Greg says still say Max Checo Sainz. We'll see who is more so correct tomorrow. But I think predicting Leclerc Verstappen front row, I think, is not that wild. And I think it's quite likely that that it will happen. Anyway, cheers for the comments, guys. Make sure to post them. Maybe I'll read out a couple more before we get to the end of the stream. But let's now just whiz through the rest of the teams, and we will go on to now very quickly the Alpine team, who are shit slow. As I said in my preview last night for the weekend, obviously a few weeks ago they were complaining to the FIA that with the engine development being frozen, that they're suffering because of that, because they believe their power unit is quite a bit down on the others, say 30 horsepower or so. And that's why around tracks like this, they're way too slow. And that's why, they look like the 8th best team this weekend. 13th and 15th in practice too. The only way they're going to end up in the top 10 is if we get, a red flag at the wrong time for, say, the Aston Martins or Mercedes drivers. They're going to really just need quite a bit of luck, I reckon, to end up in the top 10. Most likely, they'll get one car into Q2 and end up around 13th, 14th, and then the other car, probably being Ocon, who's been consistently slower than Gasly the last few races, will probably end up either just getting into Q2, if not getting knocked out in Q1. Next team we'll go on to Williams. Williams still look quick. Not as quick as I expected them to be, but they still look good. Alex Albon up in, 7th place. If he can show a bit more pace on soft compound tyres, then a third row is possible. But even if he ends up in just 7th place, that is a great result for the team. And if, he can finish 7th, 8th, something like that, and further pull away from the teams behind, that would be ideal. So yeah, Alex Albon looking great. Logan Sargent, though, tomorrow is a big day because Williams clearly have good pace. There is no excuse for Logan to be, knocked out in Q1 or any bullshit like that. He, especially, though, cannot afford to be half a second or more, slower than his teammate around a track that, again, is 80% full throttle. That just cannot happen. And if he is half a second or as much time off Albon as he was in practice 2, he was 7-8 tenths of a second off. If he's that far off, I will have to lay into him because I don't care that he's a rookie. You can't be that far off your teammate around a track like this, which is, for a driver, let's be honest, it's pretty simple. There's so many other tracks on the calendar that are more challenging to drive than Monza. Monza's a great track. I absolutely love Monza, but not exactly the hardest track in the world, is it? So I need to see something tomorrow. I need to see him. If Albon qualifies in 7th, like I've predicted, I need to see Logan 11th, 12th on the grid. And say, compared to Albon in Q2, only a tenth or so, 2 tenths of a second, say, slower. If he's half a second or more and he's getting knocked out in Q1, that is a horrendous performance. So let's hope Logan can put in the first proper strong performance, relatively speaking, compared to his teammate of 2023. But yeah, Williams look quick. I think they've got for quali the 4th best car. For the race, obviously, it'll be a bit more difficult for them. But things are looking good for Williams, and they look super competitive once again in 2023. Next up is Haas F1. Haas, obviously with Hülkenberg, were in the top 10 just about, and as we saw in the sector time data, first and final sector definitely could have been quicker. So I think if there's going to be a surprise this weekend, it's going to be from Haas and from especially Nico Hülkenberg. So watch out for him. Of course, he's been in Q3 so many times this season. He's been one of the surprises of 2023. I don't think anyone expected him to be as great as he's been in qualifying. I think he's made Q3 more times than Sergio Perez, or as many times as Sergio Perez this season. That's how mental his 2023 has been. But yeah, if they can show that extra pace in those 2 sectors, maybe Hülkenberg could be a surprise, say, getting on the 4th row of the grid, say 8th place. Definitely could happen if, again, that extra pace can be shown in, for the first and final sector, where, of course, you would think the Haas car, given that it is Ferrari-powered, the Ferrari-powered cars normally the real, strongest cars around tracks like this, you'd think that they'd be able to show a good pace through there. So watch out for Haas. I think there's definitely more pace there to be shown, and they look decently strong and are really the only dark horse, I think, going into qualifying. And also, as I said earlier, good to see that Kevin Magnussen is looking not great, but decent enough with his pace. Let's hope he can get a bit closer, though, to his teammate on pure lap time. Alfa Romeo, Valtteri Bottas. I mean, P12, again, as I said, it was really only because of how good his first sector time was. In the other 2 sectors, Alfa Romeo were terribly slow. So I don't think Alfa Romeo are really that quick. I think the best really you can hope for from them in their really nice livery, by the way, special livery, this Italian Grand Prix. The best you can hope for really is Bottas getting into Q2, but I'd be very surprised if he was, P12 qualifying. That'd be a really good performance from him. And then Zhou Guanyu was really poor in practice 2. He does need to step up in qualifying tomorrow. But yeah, Alfa Romeo should be one of the slowest teams. And so should AlphaTauri. Yeah, AlphaTauri probably will be the slowest team. Liam Lawson here. Half a second he was, I think, off Tsunoda. If he can get a couple tenths of a second, maybe quarter of a second closer to Tsunoda, then I think that would be, given, again, how little time he's had with the team and in the car, I think that'd be a good performance from him. I think it would. So, yeah, we'll see if he can do that tomorrow. But I think most likely AlphaTauri, either AlphaTauri or Alfa Romeo will get both cars knocked out in Q1. I would not be surprised by that whatsoever, of course. Two slowest teams at most tracks, and obviously the two worst teams in the championship. But guys, that is it for this qualifying preview of the 2023 Italian Grand Prix weekend. Again, reminder of the plan for tomorrow and Sunday, live from 11:15 AM UK time for the Practice 3 F2 Sprint Race and qualifying watch-along. Make sure especially to come around for the F2 Sprint Race watch-along, because it is the penultimate F2 weekend. Théo Pourchaire took pole position yesterday. Oh, not yesterday. Today, sorry. For the feature race, meaning he'll start in P10. Oliver Behrman was second. Roman Stanek was a real surprise. He ended up in third place. But, yeah, the F2 grid looking pretty interesting going into tomorrow's sprint race. And, of course, we have a very close fight in the championship between Pourchaire and Vesti. 2 weekends to go, and Théo Pourchaire leading by 12 points. So make sure to come around tomorrow to see if Théo can further secure his maiden, or his only, of course, Formula 2 championship. You can only win one in Formula 2. Let me just go through quickly what the results were. So the top 10 starting grid for the sprint race will be, obviously the top 10 is reversed for the sprint race. So it'll be Boschung on pole, Richard Verschoor second. That's a really good front row of two, kind of cult heroes, I guess, if you're a real Formula 2 fan. Frederick Vesti starts third. Really, Vesti has to win the sprint race with Théo starting in P10. Obviously, Théo starts on pole for the feature race on Sunday. Jack Crawford will be fourth. Miney in fifth. Martin sixth. Hadjar seventh. Stanek eighth. Behrman ninth. And Pourchaire 10th. So, yeah, Vesti, let's see if he can win that sprint race. But, yeah, we'll be live 11:15 AM UK time until 4:30 PM. Then on Sunday, it'll be the race preview starting at 12 PM UK time, 2 hours before the race starts. And then the race watch-along I'll be getting into when the race starts at 2 PM. And then we'll be finishing up, about 4 PM UK time. And then on Sunday, or not Sunday, Monday night, I will be live at 8 PM UK time for a weekend review the Italian Grand Prix, so make sure to come along to all of it. And again, if you are new to the channel, make sure to subscribe for all of that content coming up and hit the notifications bell. Make sure to smash the like button before you go. I can see we're on 24 likes. Let's try and get a few more if we can. Make sure to follow me on Twitter at ChazHD5. If you want to keep up with content on the channel, that's a great place to do so, if you have Twitter, of course. And if you want to get good, notifications from my streams, videos, updates, all of that, make sure to join the Discord server. Link below in the description, and a link I'm pretty sure being posted in the live chat as well if you want to join that server. But guys, until qualifying day tomorrow, the Italian Grand Prix, the Temple of Speed, Monza, it has been me, Chazza HD. Goodbye.